Hey, welcome everybody to the latest episode of the Board of Trade podcast. As always, I'm Jaipaul.
I'm Vijay.
And we are back once again for conversations about all things Brampton or things that we believe affect Brampton and are worth talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think it's probably worth noting, based on some feedback and comments we've heard on other points of view that we've had, these are editorial comments.
Yes. These are our opinions.
from Jaipaul and Vijay. Based on our information and our engagement with other people, but just an opportunity to have some fun conversations about things that are on our mind.
Totally, yeah, absolutely.
So we had a couple things we want to talk about today. The first of which is some observations we've made about the nature of businesses that organizations like boards of trade serve. We want to have a little bit of a conversation around the upcoming municipal election, what we're seeing, and perhaps what we'd like to see out of the candidates that are putting their names on the slate. The stalled CUSMA negotiations and what we think that means for businesses and Canadians broadly. And then finally, a little bit of a recap, because as like most Canadians or most people maybe in the world, we go 3.5 years without knowing anything about soccer, and then we all become soccer experts. We'll give some of our FIFA takes to wrap this up. How's that?
That sounds great.
Perfect. So we wanted to lead off with this idea about big business and who we serve here.
Yeah. This is interesting because you attended the ribbon cutting for Lululemon this morning.
That's right.
And I think it's incredible to see a lot of these facilities, these state-of-the-art facilities, and the levels of investments from manufacturers and these sort of large-scale warehousing logistics companies into Brampton. There's a certain kind of worker that is required for these sorts of jobs. But when we talk about the kind of economic development that brings about tourism and pedestrianization, and that frankly makes folks feel a civic identity, a sense of pride in Brampton, it's restaurant and retail mainly. And I don't know. Maybe we can talk a little bit about. Are we doing enough to think about these sectors of the economy? Are we doing enough to attract these folks? What are some of the barriers structurally to having just frankly a cooler city, some more main streets? What are your thoughts on that?
No, it's kind of where you are right now, and it's probably something that's worth talking out, because this is a relatively fresh thought in my mind, but you're hitting all the same talking points that I came away with from this event. So to bring people up to speed, just because it's great economic news, I guess, for the city of Brampton, is they've probably have heard that Lululemon was coming to town. The mayor's been talking about Lululemon
for a few years now.
At least I've been here 2.5 years. The entire time that I've been here, Mayor Patrick Brown's been talking about the excitement with which Lululemon's coming to Brampton, and today was the ribbon cutting on that facility. So it's a 1 million square foot facility on the northeast end of Brampton.
That's crazy. I can't even comprehend that.
Apparently, it's the equivalent that someone made the joke of using Canadian equivalency for measurement. Apparently, it's 57 NHL hockey rinks.
Oh my gosh.
Is what that's equivalent to. I think, courtesy of Minister Maninder Sidhu. But it was massive, and I was staggered by the size of it. I've been in a lot of big facilities as a byproduct of this job, and I've been in a lot of facilities that have a lot of automation and robotics in use as part of this job, because we have so many big distributors here, including Amazon. You've been in some of these facilities as well. I have never seen a larger facility. I have never seen a more automated facility than the one I was in today. It's massive. It's a huge investment. And to Lululemon's credit, they also gave credit to a whole bunch of partners they worked with, Prologis, Hammersmith, and others, to bring this really high-tech facility into Brampton. It's the largest such facility in all of North America for them. And it fulfills orders across Canada and into the eastern United States. So has real responsibility for driving their business continent-wide right now. So incredible success story. The facility can be scalable because retail is, reflects the time of year. So right now they're at a lower size in terms of staffing, but we'll scale up to 2,500 employees as they head into Black Friday and the holiday season and all that. So, real employment in our community, that's a real moving the needle in terms of the jobs it's creating. And these are, by all accounts, well-paying jobs, clean jobs, working in a high-tech facility. Many of those jobs will also involve working on those robotics and systems as well. So there's some skilled work that's coming out of this as well. So in many ways, this is really cool. And it's exactly the kind of employer we should be celebrating in the way that the mayor was. And all levels of government were there today to do exactly that for this ribbon cutting. But what made me think at the same time, and maybe it was because it was Lululemon, that, every Lululemon pair of pants or whatever athletic wear that you're going to buy if you're getting home delivery or e-commerce in Canada is going to go through that facility. But I can't buy that same pair of Lululemon pants in a retail environment in Brampton.
Yeah.
I have to leave Brampton to go to Mississauga, to go to Square One, or if you're on my budget, to the outlet malls out in Halton Hills or in Vaughan to do so.
Yeah.
But either way, the point being is we've got their flagship of their distribution model here in our city, but we have none of their retail here. And it just drove home to me that point of like, these facilities are so important because they're economic drivers. They create jobs at a scale that a small retailer cannot. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not trying to make these two things equivalent to one another. We need those big distribution facilities that hire in the hundreds to the thousands of employees. Yeah. But we talk about this role that we have here, you and I at the Board of Trade, not just in the context of economic development, but in what makes Brampton livable and cool and interesting. Yeah. And a big distribution center up in the hinterlands of Brampton doesn't make Brampton cool. Having a Bramalea City Centre that people want to go to, having a downtown Brampton that people want to eat in, that's what makes our city cool. And I wonder sometimes, do ourselves, our colleagues, economic development, not that we're doing something wrong by focusing on the big guys, but should we be creating a little more bandwidth to focus on how we bring some of these smaller businesses, quite frankly, who bring so much more to the city in terms of its reputation, as much as those who bring those big job numbers to the community.
It's an interesting point because it sort of speaks to this question of what do we believe Brampton to be in this regional economy? And it feels like Mississauga has sort of figured out a good balance between parts of its city servicing large manufacturing. They have corporate head offices. They have robust life sciences. These sort of quote unquote employment lands. Yeah. But there's also Streetsville. There's Port Credit, right? There's even Square One that's sort of become the de facto town center. There are these pockets within Mississauga that are maybe not walkable, all of them, but they are glitzier, and they do have the nice retailers and certainly the nice coffee shops and nice restaurants. And it feels like we don't really have that in Brampton, and we haven't designated parts of the city as being that. Yeah. It sort of feels at times that Mount Pleasant could potentially be something like that. Yeah. There's potential there, especially with some of the development going up. I think what makes it challenging is that we are a community of 800,000 people. And so, can we just be a collection of single family homes and manufacturers and warehousing and logistics companies? I don't know. I think we do need a little bit of that main streetification of Brampton. I'd be curious, which areas do you think are right for that sort of thinking?
It's hard to say for sure. Like, I think Mount Pleasant Village definitely has some of that potential because, and this comes back to other priorities that we talk about at the Board of Trade around our advocacy, because it doesn't just have walkable community and the right mix of residential and small commercial. It has transit. Yep. Mount Pleasant works because there's a GO station that sits in the middle of that, in addition to a library and a public school and a town square that you can have farmers markets or skating rinks in, and all the small business around it. So it's a mix of all those things. And so if you look at that sort of ideal alchemy, then you naturally go to downtown Brampton, which we talk about all the time. Yeah. I think there's a lot of undeveloped land right now around Bramalea GO Station, that cluster around Steeles and Dixie to Bramalea itself. There's some light industrial in there in that run along Steeles, but to the east and to the north, there's still opportunities to develop there. So I think if you look at just on the transit line itself, there's opportunities, but there are no shortage of clusters in the way that you're describing. Like we've got these pockets of Brampton that have been dealt with. There's not a lot right now in that Castlemore area. Yeah. And I would have to think, I drove from where I am in Brampton, which is in that Dixie and North Park area, to that facility of Lululemon's today. That's a long drive down Castlemore where all you see is houses and open land. And I don't know where anyone who lives in those houses, they're beautiful homes. I'm not knocking the neighborhood, but where do you go for engagement, entertainment, eating, and so forth? That's a part of the town around there that I would think is begging for some development and a bit of a cluster that gives walkability and options for people to live, work, and play all in one area as well. So I think those pockets exist
for sure,
and are looking for it. And in addition to a number of places in residential neighborhoods that already exist as well. I don't think. Sometimes it's a refresh of what's already there as well, right?
Yeah. I'd add to that list the Kennedy and Clarence area. We did that James Walk,
of course,
in May. I think there's it's interesting because I think there is some acknowledgement from our partners at Economic Development that that area has become a de facto fashion district for Brampton. What does that mean? How can we think about retaining some of the cultural significance of these businesses while still maybe infusing a little bit of residential, a little bit of some varying industrial mix, and having some restaurants,
and enhancing the walkability.
Exactly, that's
one of the
main
challenges
thing.
of places like, as we saw with that Kennedy and Clarence area that we did. There's a lot there, but because it grew organically and in a messy way, coming out of small retail into industrial and so forth, there was never an opportunity to defend the walkability, the pedestrian laneways, bike lanes, things of that nature that make that inhabitable. Even if you're traveling from one short distance on that run to another short distance on that run, you're likely to get in your vehicle to do so.
Yeah.
It's not a place where you park and walk around for a little while.
No, absolutely not. And the other two I'm thinking of would be the Queen Street Boulevard. So this came up in the 2040 vision work, but there was this vision of making Queen Street, that stretch, I would say roughly from Kennedy to maybe Rutherford-ish, more walkable, having some sort of higher order transit on that stretch. And then Bramalea, you mentioned it. I think it was Canada's first master plan community. There's a lot of potential with Bramalea and in particular around the Bramalea City Centre in a way that I think might be even reminiscent of a Square One in Mississauga. There's a lot of potential there,
especially the medical school and stuff going in there. And there's still a fair degree of intensification because of the apartments that are on Lisa Street and Knightsbridge and more going in that area as well.
Yes, absolutely. And then I know I talk about this ad nauseum. I think there's so much potential with downtown Brampton. We got to figure out our transit situation there. GO train is way too infrequent. The SPA is in the process of being lifted, and I hope we see a little bit more density in terms of residential development. There was, I don't know if you remember this, there was a sort of a loose idea of having a condo tower co-located with the Rose Theatre. And I know some people probably think about that and they think that sounds horrendous, but I think it's pretty interesting. It's an interesting idea.
No, I'm all for that type of stuff. And the reality is that when you're dealing with places that have these constraints in terms of space and size, then you're going to have to start thinking a little bit outside the box in terms of what feels like it's conventional. It's easy to say that, we would have these types of uses quite separated from one another. But the reality is there's a limited footprint in the downtown of Brampton. But a lot of potential in the downtown of Brampton for both employment, but also for livability and entertainment and commerce. And if you want that all to be realized, it's going to require some mixed use in ways that we haven't thought about it in the past. So the notion of a building that one lives in that's attached to a theater, or an office tower that's attached to the hotel, or whatever the case may be, I think we need to start thinking a little more flexibly about what could be in the downtown in order to accommodate all the uses that we want. But like I said, it really drove home to me, this notion, and I see it in part because I have kids that are in the age group, my daughter in particular, who covets Lululemon as a brand right now. She is their target audience. And whenever we want to buy product for her, we have to leave the city to do so, or we order it. But you can't buy it here. And I realized, that really, I sort of thought of my kid as like a one-off, but seeing that Lululemon facility today and realizing that funny contrast that the clothes I'm going to buy will go through here, but I can't buy them here. It just really drove home that notion of are we paying enough attention to the things that give our city character?
Totally.
I remember when in the early days of the LRT debate going back 10 years ago, those who were opposed to the LRT, those New Brampton and a few others, councillors and so forth, the part of the argument against the LRT was that it would just drive, if we created a corridor that linked downtown Brampton into Square One, that all we would be doing is encouraging people to go to Square One. and that it would actually be the death blow of downtown Brampton. That downtown
That's
Brampton
so
had
funny.
to be an island, because if we were too connected to the rest of the world, that people would leave. And there were those of us who argued the opposite, that we need that connectivity, and we have to have confidence that our downtown would be cool enough that people might come from Port Credit to Brampton in the way that some of us go from Brampton to Port Credit.
Yeah.
That we have to believe in the two-way.
Yeah.
And I still believe in that two-way, but in the way that you're describing, we still haven't done enough to make that a reality.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gets driven home, times like today, where it's like, oh my gosh, I could buy the product. I could work at the place that distributes the product. I have to get on a train and go to another city to buy that product.
Yeah.
And if we're not doing that, then how interesting is our city? You talked about it from a tourism perspective. I'm thinking of it just in terms of Bramptonians themselves staying in our city to eat, to play, and to shop. I don't think we're creating enough of those types of circumstances. And I think as a Board of Trade, we have to think a little bit more about what are we advocating for, whether that be in terms of zoning, whether that be working closely. You're right, our ECDEV partners have done a lot of studies, but it hasn't yet risen, I think, to the highest level of priority for them. Can we work with them, encourage that? Can we be working more closely? Morguard is a member of ours. Can we be working more closely with Bramalea City Centre to help them identify some businesses and bring them forward? We know many of the property owners in downtown Brampton, some of whom are actually holding out. There's a couple of properties in downtown Brampton that if you're scratching your head wondering why they've been sitting empty, I can tell you it's because those property owners have been holding out, wanting something interesting to come in, not just the first thing. But could we be playing a more active role in helping them find that thing? I think there's still things we could be doing as a Board of Trade to encourage that type of investment in our city beyond just a big 1 million square foot facility. We could use a lot of people doing little things that would make the place a cooler place to be.
Yeah, totally.
So anyway, that was my observation there.
Yeah.
But thank you to Lululemon. It was a fantastic thing to be part of. And I'm really excited to have them here as part of the city, and really excited to be working with them as the Board of Trade to help them find people and the resources they need to be successful.
I'll have to check out the facility. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I got to get you the tour.
Yes.
That is totally worth it. And we'll see if we can do some kind of Board of Trade event with them, maybe in the spring after they're through their holiday season where they're going to be crazy busy.
Absolutely.
And let's see if we can coordinate something in the spring with the Board of Trade and bring a bunch of our members and listeners and folks out there to check out the facility, and maybe we can talk them into some yoga pants for us all or something like that.
Sounds good.
The next thing I want to talk about is the municipal election.
Yes.
And this is a funny topic because it's obviously very prescient for both of us. It's an election. The fact that it's an election year is driving so many of the conversations we're having, and some of the conversations we're not able to have when it comes to thinking about our fall programming, our advocacy priorities, how we're communicating, because we're in this weird period right now where we still have a council. There are varying degrees of engagement right now because some of them have already declared they're running and therefore have to be a little more prudent about how public they make their opinions. But we're also not at a point yet where every candidate for the election has yet declared. They have until the end of August to do so. So we're in this kind of funny gray zone where council is a little less hands-on than they used to be. We, even folks at the city, have to be a little more tactical about how things move forward, because not everything can move forward with the same speed and vigor. But we don't yet know who all the individuals who are seeking office are yet, to start engaging them in some of the thinking and the advocacy work that we want, should they be elected and become part of the new council. So anyway, I share to say, election is kind of a funny time right now.
Yeah.
But you and I have been talking a little bit about, we've been keeping an eye on the candidates who have declared, the names that we're seeing. And I thought it would be fun to create a little bit of time to talk a little bit about, not necessarily the individuals. I applaud anyone who takes the time to put their name on a ballot and go and knock on doors and defend their ideas. Even if I vehemently disagree with them, I respect people who do that. This is not here to pile on anyone who's on a ballot. But I think it's interesting to see that there are certain types of folks that I wish we were seeing more, certain types of skills or experience, wish we were seeing a little bit more. And I thought it'd be interesting to just tap your brain and say, what do we wish we were seeing more of? And perhaps why are we not seeing the types of individuals who we'd like to see on ballots necessarily in all ridings? And is there some structural stuff that needs to be addressed?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think part of it is the nature of municipal politics, maybe politics in general, I should say. The level of the heightened scrutiny that one faces, especially with social media, I think is a massive deterrent for people to decide to put their name forward. I think the financial commitment, folks will have to take leaves from work and that sort of thing. I think that's a big decision. We talk about things like family planning and childcare and all of that. This is sort of the work that I did before coming to the Board of Trade is understanding the lived experience of elected officials and what are some of the barriers and incentives that they receive when they make this decision. But what's also quite unique about the municipal level is there is no standardization in terms of compensation. In fact, in some municipalities, being a mayor is a part-time job, and the compensation varies widely. In Toronto, there's a significant, I guess you could say, the compensation for a councillor is very much comparable to that of an MPP. So there is that sort of incentive, financial incentive. In Brampton, it's a different thing, right? There are some municipal benefits, but in terms of cash compensation, it's just under 100K, and that is an alluring salary for many people. For some, especially if they are managing families and so on, they might play their hand at the private sector or something along those lines. And what we see as well is a number of folks who are very established in their careers already. Maybe they're in the autumn years of their career. They decide to try their hand at municipal politics. We don't really see the opposite, right? People who are starting their careers, young people putting their names forward, gender diverse people, right? Folks who might reflect demographically their communities. There isn't that same level of representation. So it's just a question I've been thinking about. And I don't know how to necessarily solve this.
Yeah.
But I do think there is the opportunity to do some campaigns, not just around voting and civic engagement, but can we tap an Elections Ontario or an AMO or one of these organizations to say, all right, well, here's everything you need to know about being a candidate. And after this election is done, in the next 4 years, think about putting your name forward.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I totally agree. There is this gap that you see right now between not gap, that's the wrong word, friction for those who I think who our community would benefit. It's easy to go around and say, I would really love if that person, when you see someone on a stage or take a point of view or share a thought in some context, is that that's the kind of person who I'd love to see in public office. But know that they would never do it because of the exact reason you described. They don't want the public scrutiny and the manner in which social media and media broadly right now treats politicians, but they can't take the pay cut. They can't afford to take the pay cut, and there's something disappointing in that. Not and I don't knock anyone. You have to make the money your family needs to survive, and you do that and maintain the lifestyle you want, and you need to do that. But there's a line somewhere in there. I think that feels like if we set that bar too low, then we risk missing out on people for whom this is not an enticing enough prospect, be it financially or to overcome the things that they may be giving up in terms of their privacy in their lives and so forth. And what they have to sacrifice is their family quite often has to make, not just themselves, to be a candidate. I have wondered, if there's, it's a very half-baked idea, but I recently had to fill out I got the form from I don't even know where it comes from the government, to be in the pool for jury duty. Just that thing you have to update just to make sure you're an eligible individual, and that got me to thinking a little bit of if you get selected for jury duty, there is a certain amount of compensation you receive as part of being there, because the recognition you have to take time away from your vocation in order to serve in the public interest. I don't know what the qualification is, because you certainly couldn't just have it an open door and be for everybody. But I wonder if there's some kind of, if we just took the pressure off even of being a candidate and said if you met some certain qualification criteria, there is a minimum signature amount that one needs to get, for instance, to be on a ballot. A few other qualifications like that we could say objectively define you as being a serious candidate. If that entitled you to some kind of stipend or some kind of compensation to say you can afford to take 8 weeks off work now and go and knock on doors and work on a campaign and work on expressing your ideas and whatever you need to do in order to seriously vie for office, if that alone might encourage more people to bring forward their ideas and put their names on ballots, just knowing that they could go, because it's not just the pay cut you have to take to become an elected official, it's the dollars you have to raise and the time you have to take off your job just to be a candidate that I think makes it difficult for a lot of people. And if we could say, if you run as part of a party system, at the provincial and federal level. There are
coffers,
mechanisms there to
Yeah.
offset some of that, but at the municipal level, those things don't exist. And I
No.
wonder if there's ways to put that in place to say,
Totally.
it covers some of your cost of being out from work, and there's a spending cap or something like that, where even if we can't reimburse you, at least if you can raise this much, you're on a level playing field with everybody.
Yeah.
That would allow you to. It would just encourage more people to get involved in the process.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm very intrigued by Quebec, specifically Montreal and Vancouver, who have political parties at the municipal level.
Yeah.
I think that's an interesting idea. I think what's unfortunate about municipal politics in Ontario is that it's often a popularity contest. Incumbents almost always get the job when they run again, and that creates a disadvantage for first-time candidates unless it's an open race. However, I'm very curious about how to improve local democracy in this way. The other piece that I often think about is related to the relationship that municipalities have with the province, and the fact that they are creatures of the province, as we say, and the elections themselves are administered by city clerks' offices and the municipality themselves. So essentially, taxpayer money, your property taxes pay for the elections that you have at the municipal level, and I think that's unfortunate. I think what that creates is a system that does not breed innovation. I don't think there's the same level of retrospective analysis and introspection that provincial and federal elections have. And I wonder, are there extrajudicial bodies that or administrative bodies like in Elections Ontario or whatever it is that could administer elections that are third party and do not change depending on the councillors you elect or the mayors you elect, that are solely focused on improving local democracy? I think that could potentially go a long way. I mean, that's sort of the work that we do, but we're also resource constraints as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's really outside of our scope,
Yeah,
quite frankly.
exactly, yeah.
We do it because we have an interest in doing it, and we do it because there isn't anyone else doing it. We're going to be hosting the municipal debates later this fall. I know a couple of organizations who will be hosting some debates as well, but I don't know of anyone else who's going to be doing, at least the full slate of mayoral candidates and potentially some of the wards, or maybe all the wards, working with a media partner. As far as I'm aware, we're the only ones doing that.
Yeah.
That is not Board of Trade work proper, but I think it's important work to be done, and so we're doing it.
Yes.
Knowing that there are, if there was a framework out there, a structure out there, whether it came from the province or others, to help make that happen, or provide resources to organizations like ours who are prepared to do the work, I think would be immensely beneficial to everyone involved. Because ultimately, if organizations aren't willing to step outside of their comfort zone and put these types of events together, we have a full slate of stuff that you and I are talking about in terms of candidate profiles and engagement points and so forth. How do voters become even aware? We just don't have the media resources in communities like Brampton, and we're not a small community. You said 800,000 earlier. It's actually 850 is what the city will say. We know it's really closer to
a million.
I don't think it's an exaggeration to say there's probably 1 million people in the city. Not all of whom are eligible voters, but all of whom should at least be aware of what's going on in their community. And we're nowhere near that.
Yeah, absolutely, completely agree.
And and then we get the record low numbers of voter turnout that we get. Was it 22% last time?
24,
24%. There you go.
6,
Yeah. So I don't know how you overcome that, but I think part of that is having candidates that, bring it back where we started from, to having candidates that at least spark the imagination and get people interested.
I completely agree.
When looking at again, we're not calling anybody who's on the ballot. Are there any sort of groups of or demographics or things that you wish you were seeing more of that we're not seeing?
I mean, the obvious one for me is young people, and I would say, look, there are women candidates who are putting their name forward, but I haven't done the count. I think it's a small minority relative to the other names on that list. I'd love to see some more some different voices on council. Not disparaging the councillors that we have, but I think there is a level of ingenuity that comes with diverse perspectives, and so I'd be curious to see what a young person has to say about the housing crisis, or you know,
Well, someone who's living and experiencing the housing crisis, quite
yeah.
frankly, right?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't done my homework, but what is the ratio of homeowners to renters,
Yeah.
right, on council? I don't have these statistics, so I don't want to necessarily speak out of turn, but I think the sort of I think the diversity of candidate that we're seeing in, say, Toronto,
Yeah.
I think is something that is aspirational for me
Yeah.
in Brampton, right? We're seeing a lot of folks who are saying, you know what, 60, 70% of the city of Toronto is renting. We need more renters on council, right?
Yeah.
We need, again, a greater diversity in terms of gender and gender expression, of age, of demographic, broadly speaking, and I think we're on our way in Brampton, but I'm not seeing that with the candidate list yet.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You know, I agree. And if I was to say, to add something to that list, I would look at people who have experience working in civic institutions, who understand the machinations of how municipalities work, and what influence it takes to get things done, and how to work with other levels of government to get things done. One of the things I think Patrick Brown has been particularly effective as a mayor for Brampton is he understands federal and provincial politics.
Exactly.
He's a child of both of those systems. So coming into the municipal level, he came with a whole bunch of relationships. He came with a whole bunch of understanding that he was able to use to get things done in Brampton very, very quickly. And I'm not saying everyone who comes at the municipal level has to have that experience of having served as an MP or an MPP. But if you're part of an institution that works with those levels of government, you can also bring those types of relationships and understandings. And what I don't see, and I do think this is part of the constraints of things like salary and so forth, and the prestige of the job, not the prestige of the public versus private nature of the job, is that it's difficult to entice people who are senior leaders in civic institutions to say, I'm going to step away from this comfortable job I have because I really want to make an impact. And I think I can make that impact at the municipal level. Because I think many people, if you spoke to them privately, would say, I could make a difference. I feel like I could make a difference, and would have the relationships and the know-how to do so, but aren't going to step away from their current comfort zone, understandably.
I completely agree, and we're doing some work on housing. We're doing some thought leadership there, and we've not to give too much away just yet, but we've sketched out this profile of the middle income worker in Brampton, and what's interesting is I think there are lots of these kinds of workers who tend to work in logistics, manufacturing, warehousing, but healthcare as well. Yeah. And it was such a breath of fresh air when Councillor Brar was first elected. She was a nurse. Yeah. And she had that perspective. Yeah. I think that kind of perspective is needed on council. Yeah. And so in addition to the civic institutions piece, I think folks who are working in these industries that make up so much of the employment in Brampton, I think,
and that's really where my comment around if there's some way you could subsidize or make it easier for people to take the time away from work to run as candidates as part of its civic responsibility, I think would allow that person who is a shift worker or someone who's working for an hourly wage to say, I can step away, even if it's just minimum wage. That can offset enough that my employer will understand, and I have the ability to do so without penalty and fear that I'll lose my job, and my family has enough income to cover off my basic expenses while I'm running. I think that would encourage exactly who you're describing to run. But right now, unless you have a very understanding employer and the financial resources banked to do so, if you're a person working in an hourly type of capacity, that person you're describing, it's really difficult for them to step away from work and have the confidence that they have, should they not win, a job to come back to and a means of looking after themselves in the meantime. Totally. Because the reality is, and I want to be clear, like when we're talking about all this stuff, I'm not talking about a shift in council. If we get different councillors at the end of the day, so be it, and we'll work with them just as well as we work with the folks we have now. We got a great relationship with council. It's not about that. I think there's something really unique and important about an election process. Yes. That's where fresh ideas come forward. Yes. We know what our current council wants to do, and they've articulated their priorities for the most part, and they work toward them. And I'm not here to criticize or laud them for it. That's a neutral point of view. But if we want innovation and we want new ideas to come forward, that comes about when candidates are forced to debate their ideas, when they're forced to defend their ideas, and they're forced to engage with other like-minded people who say, I want your job, and here's how I think I could do it better. That's where innovation comes from. Even if we end up with the exact same council we have right now, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
What I really want is an interesting and engaging election cycle
Yeah.
that allows for fresh ideas to come forward. Even if my candidate didn't win, therefore, I can still go to the counselor who did and say, I really thought this idea was a good idea. Can we talk about that?
Yeah.
And maybe that leads to something new and interesting and progressive happening in our community.
Totally.
To me, the election is way more important than who, and that process being successful is way more important than who actually ends up serving on council.
Totally. Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm
Yeah.
really excited to see if we can find some ways to bring some of these ideas forward.
Yeah.
But more than anything, try to encourage people. If you're listening to this podcast and you're considering running for municipal council, we encourage you to do so.
Yes.
Particularly if you, in the manner that Vijay described, represent a point of view or perspective that is representative of our community, but not represented currently on council or the current slate of candidates. We need that diversity of thought in order to create the Brampton that we all want.
Yeah. Completely agree.
And I'm just really curious to see what we see the next couple of weeks.
Yeah,
We're still, I meant to check before we came on. I think about 7 weeks out.
Yeah.
August 21st, I think, is last day to declare.
Yeah.
Something like that. So 6 to 7 weeks before we'll know what the full slate is.
Yeah.
And at that point, our current council will all have to officially declare, which means at that point, really stepping back from their council responsibilities. And then, come September, October, we're in full campaign mode at that point in time.
Exciting times.
That's when the real fun will be.
Yeah.
For sure. We want to talk a little bit about Kuzma.
Yeah.
And what's going on there. Right now, we're kind of seized.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to not talk about it because it's kind of the business issue in many ways for Canadian businesses right now.
It's interesting because I never know how to feel about Kuzma and the state of trade, especially with the United States. It's something we get asked a lot, and I just kind of shrug my shoulders. There's no intention to renew Kuzma, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's over. It's still in effect for about 10 years. There's some appetite to negotiate what are called, I guess, bilateral protocols, like side deals and things like that, which is interesting. That might present some opportunity, but ultimately, I think you had some discussion with folks when the tariff task force at the city of Brampton was being wrapped up. There were some interesting perspectives, I think, shared at that discussion. The usual suspects, the steel and aluminum in particular, I think they're going to face acute pressure because of the nature of the tariff program. Everybody else, almost everybody else, has indicated an issue that predates Donald Trump, something that it has frankly nothing to do with our trade deals, and issues that domestic governments, whether that be federal, provincial, or municipal, can have a hand in influencing. So why don't you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, I appreciate that, and you characterized it well. There's been a lot of conversation among Brampton business leaders on the state of tariff, and this is among the things that was convened through the task force. I believe we may have even talked about this a little bit on our last pod as well, and some of the good work that came out of that. But what was really interesting and insightful to me was that how little tariff actually became the conversation that those business leaders wanted to have. To your point, we had some good representation in the room from businesses that directly are in the businesses of processing commodities like steel and aluminum, and certainly they voiced their ongoing concerns. It was interesting, however, one of the things that they spoke to was not just the punitive nature of tariffs broadly, but specifically more so, and this comes back to like when tariffs first started. Remember there was there was all these different codes that people had to know if something was tariff eligible or not. And certain industries, it was really nuanced. I remember a lot of our members in the food industry in particular was like, this ingredient is, but this like slight variation of ingredient is not. And like, if you use this dye, it is, but use a slightly different dye, it's not. And there was a lot of time spent just trying to understand what was tariff protected and what was under Kuzma and what was not. In the case of steel and aluminum, they're continuing to cite perspectives like that not just that tariffs are punitive broadly, but more the challenge is just keeping up, because every time there's a revision to the tariffs on aluminum, for instance, there are always carve-outs for certain types of extrusions or certain types of processing, or in some cases types of aluminum, that result in, we're now, this part of our business has become much more problematic, but it has created some opportunities over here. And every business who spoke to this, I just want to make sure is clear as well, didn't speak to us like we're just getting hammered. They were speaking to like we're getting hammered in areas, but what we're really frustrated about is like every 6 months we have to relearn the whole tariff schema one more time.
Yeah.
But that's a bit of a tangent. The bigger point that you were trying to get me to was around the fact that most of the people in the room did not want to talk about tariff, and unless provoked specifically, tariff wasn't the issue they cited when it came to the challenges their business were facing. These were the business challenges that predated tariff, and it struck me in the way that you described. But what really struck me was these were in many ways the same issues that when the tariff schema first changed, when Trump came into power, these were the very things that we said we were going to do. And here we are a year and change later, and we still haven't done. And in your absence, I took over your blog spot in our newsletter.
Yeah.
So I wrote a couple of pieces around this. And that was specifically the pieces around the lack of movement on interprovincial trade. There have been some specific relationships, province to province, and some sectoral adjustments that have been made. But the broader framework of opening up trade between provinces or among provinces across the country, bilaterally, or I don't know what we say when it's 10 provinces and 3 territories, whatever tetralaterally.
Exactly. Multilateral.
Multilateral. Let's go with that. We still haven't seen tremendous movement. There have been some individual deals between certain provinces, but we haven't seen a lot of movement there that still harmonizes standards, taxation, even for things like cartage and vehicles and things of that nature for truckers to move across the country in an efficient way, unencumbered by additional taxation and regulation. This is completely within our own power to solve, but we've not solved it. And then similarly, the other issue that I puts a little bit of attention to, and for me, I think will be an increasing area of focus for the Board of Trade in the latter half of the year, is that around workforce. And every employer who was a large employer, spoke to the fact that they're still having challenges with not attracting good workers. We have the talent base here. It's retaining good workers because we lose them for reasons unrelated to the quality of their work or the wages they get paid. It has everything to do with immigration status.
Yes.
And we simply do not have a framework in Canada right now that allows employers to hire with confidence and does not allow employees to stay or have confidence in their ability to stay in Canada. And that is having a number of ripple effects all over the place. And we can. Quite frankly, I would like to do a whole podcast on workforce soon. I think it actually merits that because I would love to dive in for our listeners our understanding of the topic. It's very complicated, and there are a lot of layers there. Provincial, federal, the nature in which you come to Canada, what allows you to stay in Canada. And I think it actually merits a whole standalone podcast.
Yeah, me too.
But long story short, right now, people get hired. They're not sure if they can stay in the country. Employers aren't sure if they can keep them. And so they lose those people. Why that matters now? That is something that has nothing to do with Donald Trump. The tariff regulations or rules, whatever you want to call them, from the United States does not prevent us from looking at our own immigration processes in a way that allows Canadian businesses to be competitive. But we've chosen not to do this very obvious reform when every economist who studies Canada, the Canadian economy, will tell you we have a massive productivity challenge here. We simply do not create enough. We do not make enough. We do not innovate enough. And we're telling a whole swath, and the solution to that problem, by the way, is having more skilled, innovative, and educated people enter the workforce. We can't produce those people fast enough in Canada. They are going to come from abroad. We had an immigration system that in many ways was broken. And again, we'll talk about that in a later podcast and why that needed to be fixed. But the fix was not to close the doors in the manner that we did. And I share this not to go on my whole soapbox about workforce now, we will later, is more so to say, we continue to look at the boogeyman of the United States as the reason for why the Canadian economy is struggling. Mm-hmm. And we are doing some stuff. I'm not suggesting that the federal government is being negligent here. They're building on-trade relationships with other countries. They are putting lots of incentives into Canadian businesses to innovate and access new markets. But the fact that we have these two very clear things right on the table here that are completely within our scope. We don't have to sign a trade agreement with another country to say, bring more smart, educated, and hardworking people into the country so that our employers can hire with confidence. And oh, by the way, you can trade within the country in a manner that is easy, unencumbered, and without red tape. Those to me seem like the obvious no-brainers to start with. And the latter of the two, the red tape piece, the interprovincial piece, was something we said we were going to do a year ago and still hasn't been done. Anyway, I've been talking for a long time uninterrupted, but this to me drives me nuts that we talk all about CUSMA and this relationship with the United States, and we haven't cleaned up our own house yet.
No, I don't disagree for sure. I think what I'd love to see in addition to all of that is consistency in credentialing. I'm not even talking about foreign credentialing. No. That's a whole other beast. But I have a friend who had to move to Manitoba. They lived in Ontario. They were studying to become a registered nurse, doing their practicums and whatnot. They had to move to Manitoba because their partner got a job out there. They had to start the process all over again.
Right.
And if there's no harmonization across provinces in terms of our labor and workforce, then we're leaving tons of money on the table.
You have to have a mobile workforce in this country.
Exactly. So to me, that should, in theory, be the low-hanging fruit. I think to create net new industry, to facilitate new innovation, all of that's the hard work. That's the stuff that may take billions of dollars and a time lag. In theory, if you liberalize the flow of workforce, if you address red tape and make it easier to do cross-border trading and all of these things, that to me that can unlock prosperity. And I take a little bit of issue with how we're defining nation-building projects. To me, a well-connected transit system is nation-building, right? We again unlock productivity through an investment opportunity through allowing for more frequent and predictable and reliable train service. Mm-hmm. We've heard from developers that all of a sudden projects pencil out if we have 2A all day go.
Yeah,
as an example. So, all of these things I feel like should be on the table, and it's not as politically convenient and expedient as blaming Donald Trump, but ultimately this is the work that should be done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I fear that we are. I don't think it's an either or.
Yeah.
I think unfortunately we've allowed our attention to make it feel like it's an either or. Yeah. That infrastructure projects, defense spending, things of this nature. I want all of that, but I want all that and I think the and is not only doable. I think it's vital. Yeah. At the end of the day, if we don't have that workforce that is going to be here, we've been saying this from the beginning. Whether you're talking about building physical infrastructure, whether you're talking about creating new jobs, whether you're talking about innovation, whether you're talking about startups, none of that happens with just the existing talent pool we have here. Yet we still haven't taken the steps to address that talent pool issue while we're looking at these big projects. To me, it starts with that, or at the very least has to happen in parallel.
Yeah.
The part that really drives me crazy is maybe it's happening at some level that we have no visibility to. But in all the businesses I talk to, in all the trade organizations I talk to, all the other boards of trade and chambers I connect with, not one person can tell me, and I always ask this question because I am obsessed with this question, have you had a consultation with anyone who is empowered to make a decision on this issue? And to a person, I have not yet had one person say, I have had an opportunity to talk to someone at IRCC or at the federal government
this is
about what type of employee and what type of credential do you need in order to be successful as a business?
This is a whole other piece. I mean, the Minister of Immigration has been a no-show. No. And, their staff, I think we've talked about this on a previous podcast, but it's profoundly frustrating.
I think it was just an office rant by me, actually.
Maybe. But I think we'll do some engagement with our caucus during the summer. This is my number one piece of feedback is immigration is the hottest file in this community, and the minister has not made a single public appearance or done any sort of commentary. Yeah. And she's let her staffers sort of run with the show a little bit.
Yeah, and I would say even with the staffers, we haven't seen the feedback. Yeah. We've done outreach, we haven't heard back. And to your point, in this community, it matters most. If not in Brampton, if you're not going to have a serious and engaging and two-way listening conversation around immigration, then you're not having the conversation.
Yeah.
So, I'll dare say, if you're not here in Brampton, don't tell me you're having an immigration conversation.
Yeah.
It's not happening.
It's not happening.
Because I don't know what community you're having it in,
Yeah.
where you can understand the nuance of what's happening here. And the notion that we should be looking to other forms of talent domestically and otherwise. If we can't hire those who are coming from abroad in Brampton, we don't have a labor pool in Brampton.
Yeah.
And I would go so far, I know I wave the local banner and I'm a homer, but I would say we have the best talent pool in the country here and we are not tapping into them. And it is ridiculous. And then you start thinking about the other issues we're having in our community around safety, criminality, other things of that nature. To me, many of those things have direct tiebacks right to the fact that you bring people here, you give them the opportunity, whether they come as students or otherwise, into the country, you say you have opportunity in Canada, and then you tell them that opportunity's been taken away. You can't go home, you can't afford to live here, you can't work legally. Well, what are you doing except pushing people into precarious situations where they're going to make bad decisions?
Yes.
And I'm not saying everyone who does a bad thing is a victim, but it doesn't help when we create the circumstances that drives people into no-win situations either. All right. So maybe let's end on a fun note.
Okay. Yeah.
Normally we wrap this up with a bit of like a media, pop culture-y kind of take. And FIFA is the only thing I think that's going on right now. It definitely has been very top of mind for me at the very least.
Yeah.
So you tell me. We wrapped up the lateral component of the tournament. Toronto had its last game last week. BC, Vancouver had their last game. Was it today or yesterday?
I think it was yesterday.
Yesterday. So the Canadian leg is done. The Mexican leg is done. It's now just an exclusively American component left of the World Cup. Our own team lost last Saturday, so they've been eliminated as well.
Yeah.
So although the tournament still continues, now might be an inflection moment to say, with the Canadian team out and the Canadian games done, was hosting this tournament a success for Canada? We may change our opinion in a couple of weeks when things wrap up, but I think now's the time to ask the question at the very least.
It's tough to say in terms of the economic numbers because again, there's a bit of a lag with that. But what I'll say is I think it created a sense of civic pride that I hadn't seen in a long time. I think there was some good PR for Brampton. 20% of the Canadian men's national team is from Brampton, and so that's great. We have some local folks who had the opportunity to make official merch. So that's really cool. Coke, big sponsor of and partner.
I think they're official a global sponsor. But
sponsor,
yes.
Yes.
But Coke Canada here in Brampton had a big role to play with the Canadian activation of Coke stuff here. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's great in that sense, and there were definitely benefits to Brampton itself. Garden Square was the busiest I've ever seen it. In
what? Just because I'm just curious, because we always want to boast Brampton a little bit. For those who don't know what Garden Square is, talk about Garden. We talked about the Rose Theatre and Garden Square. I realize we just kind of throw this stuff out there
enough.
With the assumption that everyone else knows downtown Brampton the way we do. Talk about Garden Square and what goes on down there.
There is this intersection at Main and Queen and Main, Queen and Main, and there's this sort of opening in the sort of I guess the land just ahead of the Rose Theatre, and it's this open space, this public square, and several years ago, maybe a decade ago now, they put up this massive TV screen at the intersection, and it has become this gathering place for folks, and the gathering place I would say in downtown Brampton. Where the Rose Theatre might do some activations there. They used to have Wednesday night concerts and Friday night concerts. I believe they're doing that again this year. And they occasionally have movie nights and for FIFA they had watch parties. Yeah. And so it's one of the few kind of third spaces that we have in Brampton that where people can go to and they can feel a sense of community. And it's usually this around this cultural event. Sometimes there are street festivals and whatnot in this square, and the local business benefits greatly as well from the pedestrianization. So that's Garden Square.
I think it's awesome. I just realized we throw out the term without really defining what it is. Yeah. But you're right. It's everything from the festivals at the Rose Theatre. Yeah. Brampton Pride was there a couple weeks ago. There are concerts. The big screen is used for movie nights. When the Blue Jays had their playoff runs, the games are shown there. When the Canadian Olympic team is competing, the games are shown there. So the events are shown there. And then every FIFA match has been shown there, and it's a big square. There are Adirondack chairs set up there sort of year round. There's some tables with umbrellas year round. There's some shaded areas where one can sit. There's a fountain, but people show up with their lawn chairs, and depending on who the country is, the crowd may, the size of the crowd may vary, but there's not a single game that's been there where you haven't seen at least a few hundred people sitting there watching the soccer game with the sound on. All happily taking it in and cheering in their respective countries' jerseys. And when certain countries were playing, pockets of our community that I did not realize existed in those numbers. When Ghana played, you were there. Did you see when Ghana played?
I walked by it.
It was crazy.
It was cool.
I did not know we had that many Ghanaian people in Brampton, but there was all these fantastic folks there in their yellow jerseys, and I got sucked in. I was walking to my car to get home, and I stayed an extra half hour because I just loved watching the Ghanaian fans responding to a game where they were fighting for their lives for a draw. And not even to win the game, and such a victory for them, running around chanting, and what's always remarkable to watch is the folks who were not just Ghanaian fans, not in the jerseys, but I'm going to stereotype based on appearance and skin color. Probably not Ghanaians getting swept up with the fans and becoming part of the cheering throngs and all that. Like that's what a third space in the community is supposed to look like.
Yes.
I remember when they first were opening up that garden square, I was among the people, I'll own it, who thought the big TV was a terrible idea. And that was going to be a huge eyesore. And for people driving by, like it's going to be a distraction. I really didn't like the idea of a giant Jumbotron in downtown Brampton. But I will admit now, I was totally wrong. The fact that it's there, and when it's not in use, it does a good job of like promoting arts and the Moksha events that you host, for instance, like those are promoted on that screen for people going by. And no doubt some of the audience that discovers your music festival learned about it from the big TV. But when they turn that big TV on for something that's actually a community cultural event, it's a pretty fantastic thing. Like I got to give total credit to the city for that one.
And I will say there was a time when they weren't using that TV to its potential.
I think that if I recall, I think it was really the Blue Jays playoff run. Where it felt like the first time where it really turned into a cultural event. Was to have that on, and not the most recent one, but the one a couple of seasons back, the Joey Batista bat flip year. That seemed like that was the year when they really understood what the potential of that television was.
Totally. Yep. Absolutely.
But anyway, so in many ways, very great for a community Brampton. But any other sort of thoughts on FIFA in general? Do you still have a team? Do you still care?
I honestly I don't really care for soccer that much. I'm rooting against the colonizers.
There you go. I agree. Every game where it's an African nation, in particular, or against a European nation, I'm 100% on Team Africa.
Yes, exactly.
I'm definitely there. It's hard not to get swept up in it. I'm not a big soccer fan, but it is really easy when watching it to understand why it is the global game. That how it brings people together. It's remarkable in that I can watch a game between two countries I don't really have a rooting interest in, other than exactly what you've described. But I am living and dying on every shot on goal, and by the end, I always have a rooting interest. And by the end, my heart's either elated or broken at the end of every game, even if I don't even care about who's playing. It is a remarkable thing to take in, and there's a whole commentary about the evil of FIFA and all that as an organization. But there is something really special, I have to admit, about global soccer.
Totally.
But I think overall, we've been hearing, I think the reports are coming out, FIFA not so good for Toronto. I don't know if you saw any of the economic stuff that's been coming out initially.
I've seen headlines, and this is what kind of prompted the discussion, because there's a bit of a debate. Some people are thinking, if it's a net cost, fine. These sort of monoculture events are important. And others who are saying that it's extractive, it is not worth it at all. Where do you land? How do you?
I think I'm a little more toward the latter. I think these events. It depends on the city. Right. Did Toronto need to be known as a global city? Like, there's this idea that we have to do these certain things to like have a certain cachet. I don't know that for a city. I think Toronto should have the confidence that we are a global city. And we are an important cultural institution around the world, and people know it as a destination. And you don't need to host something like this at great cost to legitimize that. I could be wrong, but that's kind of how I think about it. But I did think it was interesting to see that the response ultimately resulted in being a sunk cost or a loss of that investment.
Dollars,
in that people chose not to go into Toronto because the average worker, as I understood it,
Yeah.
and I know anecdotally I can attest to this. I had family members
A lot
who
of
said,
work from home.
I'm working from home during FIFA. The Go service is no longer reliable. The trains are overpacked because there's just so many people taking them. So there was a loss of revenue from the sort of the day-to-day office worker. And then they started to see now in terms of hotel bookings and other things that the tourist trade dropped out. And there was a bunch of hotel sales and things like that at the last minute because the FIFA bookings just didn't come through in the way that they thought they would.
Yes.
And then everyone who else didn't come in, because apparently Pride and a few other festivals that were concurrent with FIFA saw a drop this year because people didn't want to come to Toronto.
Yes, yes.
So in the net, like you may legitimize yourself by some global standard out there that I think is kind of ephemeral, and I don't know if that really is necessary, at the cost of what makes you a great city day in, day out, or year in, year out. Like Toronto's Pride is like that's an annual landmark event that we take tremendous small p pride in. That the vibrancy of it, the summer in Toronto and the festivals and the music and all the things that happen there are something that even as someone who lives in Brampton, I get excited about the opportunity to engage that culture. To have that all taken away for a few weeks of soccer games feels like a bit of a loss in the net to me. But for Brampton, great community pride. Our Portuguese community, which is very strong in Brampton, had a great run. And the 6 players on the, and I think I'm trying to get better at saying this. The Canadian men's soccer team, did really, really well, because we talk about Canada having all these breakthroughs. And when I did some posting about this, I realized our Canadian women's national soccer team has already been there. They've already been to the top of the mountain.
They have.
So we talk about all these breakthroughs for Canadian soccer. Let's be clear, Canadian men's soccer. Canadian women's soccer has already been kicking butt literally for a long time. But no, I think overall, happy that it happened, and happy that so much of Brampton had some fun as a result of it.
That's great.
Very good.
There you go.
All right. So is that kind of what we want to talk about this week? Yeah,
I'd say so.
Awesome. So thanks very much for listening. We appreciate it. Hope you had a good time with us. And we'll be back very shortly with our next episode of Member Board of Trade.
Thank you.
All right.